Welcome to Bay Area Psychology. 2 seasons ago, we met with the founders of Nicotine Addiction Treatment Program, NATO, in Los Gatos as the program began. Since that time, nicotine has been declared an addictive substance by the FDA. National attention has been focused on reducing smoking by minors, and more cities than ever are declaring themselves smoke-free. Tonight, we are joined by one of the founders of NATO, Chris Newkirk, and a graduate of the program, Sherry Wysocki, to update us on both NATO and nicotine and women. Ladies, I want to thank you for joining me this evening. I appreciate you making the time to come down, particularly here during the holiday season. Now, you are about to graduate, I think, when the 16th?
Yes,
from
my
NATO.
birthday.
That'll be your smoking-free birthday.
Present,
and you're
yeah.
entering the holiday season smoke-free. How does that feel to you?
Feels wonderful.
Okay,
Love
it's
it.
fabulous. Now, you, I would guess, like most smokers, NATO was probably not your first attempt at quitting. Is that
Oh,
right?
I've attempted many, many times before.
Okay. What was different in your life when you made a decision to go ahead and commit yourself to such a rigorous program?
I knew I needed something that was rigorous like NATO because the attempts I made before, I would say were successful, because any attempt is successful, I think.
Okay.
But I obviously went back to smoking. The first time I think was about a year, the second time about a year and a half, and then I've had 6 months and a few months. But I always went back to smoking, and I never addressed any emotional issues or anything that made me want to smoke in the first place. So some of the things were you know, emotional childhood things I didn't know I was smoking over, or a breakup of a relationship. I just wanted to smoke again, and it relieved me.
Okay, so really you became increasingly clear that nicotine for you was not just about the smoking itself, but that in fact it served a function.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look. Chris, I know that part of your philosophy is that recovery is a process, and I went ahead and borrowed some terminology from the book Quit and Stay and Quit, and I thought we'd take a look at that to explain the process.
All right,
All right?
good.
Let's see. Contemplation, where you're thinking about quitting. Determination, making a decision to quit. Action, taking the action to quit. Abstinence, staying quit. Maintenance is about your experiences staying quit. And then relapse is making sure that you don't go back to smoking. Okay? Let's take a look at contemplation. It sounds like, and I know this is true from people I know that have a history of smoking, that the thinking about quitting is a long time. I mean, most people don't just wake up one morning and decide, I'll never quit again, right? Or never smoke again.
Absolutely. Well, actually what we use is the ASAM model, which is similar to this model that you just put up. The American Society of Addiction Medicine has studied the nicotine process. And part of the contemplation process is really what they call pre-contemplation. All right? So there are 2 parts to that. And this is just simply thinking about not using nicotine. And as we understand it, that can go, we can sit around and think about quitting smoking for up to 7 years.
Wow.
So this is the longest part of the whole process, the contemplation of letting go of nicotine.
Okay.
So what we try to do is help people in a very loving and non-shameful manner sit in a contemplation group as long as they need to, all right, to devise strategy to move towards their quit date. As you know, a lot of programs, and in addiction treatment programs, we've oftentimes used interventions that were designed for action-oriented people, with people who were actually only contemplating letting go of their drug of choice.
That's right.
All right. So it's very important that people be placed in the correct group so that they don't end up shaming themselves more so as a result of not being in an action phase whatsoever.
You know, that's an interesting point. I know that I'm currently supervising a new program called Treatment Options, which is looking at people transitioning out of drug court and deciding whether or not they want to stay clean and sober. And that has come up for us also, and I've started a contemplation or pre-contemplation process for that very reason, because what was happening is people were being referred to addiction treatment and they really weren't ready. I mean, the closest they'd gotten to it was maybe quitting is a good idea. So it's nice that you provide a place for being able to people to actually weigh it and say, is it going to be worth what it's going to take
Absolutely.
for me to do this? Now, Sherry, when you weighed that for yourself, I mean, what made the commitment worth it to you? I mean, why was smoking so, quitting smoking so important to you?
Well, first I was going to say the pre-contemplation. I quit the day that I started NATO, so I didn't really have a pre-contemplation. I didn't get a chance to do that, but I'm glad because I needed to do it that way. Well, what was happening with me, the situation was my boyfriend, who's my husband now, sat down with me and was very upset that I was smoking and said more or less he loved me a lot and it was hurting him to see me kill myself. And it hurt me to hear him say that. And I knew I needed help. And when I ran across an article that Chris Newkirk wrote about the anger that comes up for you when you quit smoking, and that's what always put me back into lighting up another cigarette, was the anger. And she talked about second stage recovery issues, and I knew there was hope, and I called the number and made an appointment and quit the night that I started NATO. So.
Now, for our viewers, let me point out that second stage recovery is usually for people that maybe have been clean and sober from other drugs of choice.
That's right.
For at least a few years, and find that underlying issues begin to show up, like relationship issues, family of origin issues, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's your experience then with other people in NATO, as people come in and have tried themselves and maybe might be clean and sober from other drugs or things like that?
Well, actually what's happened is we have a lot of people who are recovering from other drug addictions in our program. And as you know, nicotine needs to be viewed as a gateway drug.
Okay.
I really believe this. This is usually the first drug that people use. And they take the dad's cigarette and they smoke and then they go to the booze, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're finding is that nicotine is oftentimes the gateway drug, and then it's also the last drug that people choose to let go of. For people who happen to be recovering from other drug addictions, there's a lot of cultural and community myths about nicotine that come into play. Weight. All right, and here's the most dangerous drug out of them all in terms of addictive properties, and people are being told to wait. Deal with the other drugs first, deal and wait with your nicotine. So we've ended up with a lot of people in our program who've been sober off of other drugs, alcohol and other drugs, for a long period of time, maybe 8 years sober, 18 years sober, 15 years sober, and are still attached to nicotine. All right, so when they let go of that drug, they have a backlog of emotional issues, not only prior to the alcohol, but also at what I call the sobriety-related disappointments, the sobriety-related issues. Now, this is very controversial. You know, what I'm saying is very controversial because most folks believe that nicotine's not a sedative substance, that it does not mask those issues in sobriety. Well, we're finding that it does.
Yeah, you know, the experience I know I've had with people who, kind of like you have, wanted to quit smoking is they do talk about almost a numbing effect that they receive when they smoke. That in fact it does alter consciousness to some degree. I mean, obviously you're not intoxicated and you're not, you know, you're still able to function, but there is apparently a shift that that happens. So when you, Sherry, when you finally determined, okay, this is something I'm going to do and I'm going to take some action, did you at any point relapse back to cigarettes, or did you ever feel afraid that you might, or?
No, in the last 2.5 years I haven't relapsed.
Okay.
And it's funny, when I get angry or something, I was just telling Chris earlier that I smoked a lot last night in my dreams. So that's a great gift that you can have. You can still smoke, but it's in another realm.
Okay. So for you it became very clear that it was about a few strong emotions, like anger, maybe fear, other things like that. Okay. Now as a woman, because I know part of what we're talking about tonight is how this affects women in particular. I mean, do you think there's any special challenges you faced as a woman trying to quit smoking?
Yes, absolutely. One thing is the weight, I think, and I really didn't have a problem, although I think I needed to probably put on weight when I quit smoking because it's such an appetite suppressant that I need to probably put on weight. But that is a scare. In the past, I would start smoking thinking I've put on too much weight. But with the nicotine addiction treatment option, I didn't really put on a lot of weight at all.
Okay.
So,
what's your experience with that with women in general? I mean, do you find
Very
that
important, in my view. Probably the most important issue for women trying to come off of nicotine. In adolescence, of course, adolescent women are the ones who have increased in terms of smoking the most in the entire population. And I believe this is directly related to our culture's imposing on young women the belief that if they are not, you know, severely thin, they are not, of course, worthy. All right, and so the whole body image, the cultural body image issues come into play in nicotine addiction recovery very, very strongly. Most women come into groups, and I think it's really important to have gender-sensitive groups when working with any addiction, but certainly with nicotine. They come in, the number one fear that they express to me is that I am afraid I am going to gain a lot of weight if I let go of nicotine. And a lot of women, because of the cultural pressures, all right, I've had women say directly to my face, I am willing to die of emphysema rather than gain weight. And this is
so powerful.
Very powerful.
That is so powerful.
Absolutely. So the relationship between nicotine addiction and eating disorders is so very, very clear, and I think this is major. So just letting go of nicotine is not enough. We need to sit together as women, and we need to empower ourselves as women to get past the cultural restraints involved that would lead us to disempowering ourselves this way in order to look good, quote unquote, on the outside. Yeah.
We're going to need to take a quick break, but we will definitely pick up that theme here in about 30 seconds. Stay with us. When we return, we'll learn more about the process of nicotine recovery.